I thought it was worth recording in regards to this OAN, One American News Network, of that in which what the individual, the spokesman, had to say about the January 6th insurrection. It touches off on unhumanitarian tactics, but at the same time it also touches off on the seriousness of the topic that he's talking about, that if something like that was to have occurred years behind, pertaining to our ancestors, this would have been the predominant solution to the problem. Please listen to this. This was a little bit of an eye-opener.
Last thing before we go tonight is OAN. OAN is what you watch on cable if you've come to the determination that Fox and Newsmax have gone soft and don't love Trump as much as they should. Much of their programming amounts to a kind of gaslight lounge without the lounge singer, or overpriced cocktails, come to think of it, without the lounge at all, mostly just gaslight. OAN is getting attention now because of a segment they aired about the insurrection. Oh no, not the one on 1/6 that attempted to overthrow the results of a Democratic election. But you may not have heard, the election was stolen from Trump, you see, with help from the Chinese and Pakistanis, of course, who wanted to install Joe Biden in office. So you see, those nice tourist folks on 1/6 weren't actually trying to overturn an election. It was already overturned back on election day. See what they did there? That was the premise of OAN's Pearson Sharp, who then took it further.
How many people were involved in these efforts to undermine the election? Hundreds? Thousands? Tens of thousands? How many people does it take to carry out a coup against the presidency? What are the consequences for traitors who meddled with our sacred democratic process and tried to steal power by taking away the voices of the American people? What happens to them? Well, in the past, America had a very good solution for dealing with such traitors: execution.
Mr. Pearson Sharp there gave a statement to Talking Points Memo late today saying he wasn't embracing executions. But if election fraud is proven, then that's treason punishable by death. So, to repeat, no one, especially not OAN, is calling for executions to begin. They're merely suggesting that death is the remedy should treason be proven. We are happy to play a role, however small, in clearing that up. This also means Democratic insurrectionists can go ahead with those weekend plans. That is our broadcast for this Thursday night, with our thanks for being here with us. On behalf of all my colleagues at the networks of NBC News, good night.
So was also stealing someone's transportation in the 17 and 18 leading into the early 1900s, because transportation was so crucial during that time that it was acceptable of having such of a harsh penalty if anyone decided to steal someone's transportation. They was substantive of being punished to the fullest extent of the law. Thank God the people have learnt that some of these measures are just a bit overboard whenever it comes to these type of harsh tactics in regards of the earthlings down here evolving and understanding where we are today. Good luck to all of us as we always end our program here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. Good luck to each and every one of us, and God bless. Well, before I call off, there's one other thing that I need to discuss, and that's in regards to the event that has recently happened pertaining to the skyscrapers in Miami, Florida. I wanted to briefly touch on this pertaining to me living in Florida in 1979, putting up a hospital there in Tampa, Florida, and also living in Florida 3 or 4 other different times, twice in St. Augustine, once down in Homestead, Florida. And the time that I lived in St. Augustine, I actually lived down there for about a year on an island, Anastasia Island. And there are certain times of the day or night, whenever the wind is blowing just right and the barometric pressure is a certain way, that whenever you walk outside, the salt in the air will literally burn the outer layers of your eyes a little bit. And of course, we know that salt is a purifier whenever it comes to the medical industry. But salt is also a contributive cancer to metal and, yes, cinder blocks. That's the reason why anybody close to the coastal areas ordinarily don't build cinder block houses, because the dampness and the salt is just horrifying on that type of masonry. But it's also horrifying to metal. Whenever I was in St. Augustine, I was told that anybody that lived on the island within a period of about 10 years had to do extensive work on their automobile, primarily on the front, sometimes on the bottom end, pertaining to the salt that would literally rust out a radiator support out from underneath the car. Whenever I was in Homestead, Florida, which is give or take probably about an hour from where this event right here happened this past 24 hours, I pursued some jobs down in the Florida Keys, and I was told real quickly that if I did get a job on the Keys, that I would have to spray special like WD-40 or Vaseline my tools to keep them from rusting. That they would literally rust up. It didn't matter if they was some of the high quality, expensive tools from Snap-on or Cornwell or Matco or whoever, that those tools would literally rust to the point that they would be unusable. There's 2 elements pertaining to a building. A big building like this, which is concrete and steel. Concrete and steel. As long as the concrete has submerged the steel to the point that it does not become exposed to the elements around it, the steel could stay good for as long as the concrete does. I couldn't tell you the amount of times while being in Florida either around the Daytona area or some of the other areas towards the hotels and motels there, and you could see where various buildings had cracked. Their foundation had cracked, and then they went in behind it with mortar towards trying to fill it up. Well, filling it up with mortar is a good thing because it helps prevent from humidity and etc. from getting into the walls, which, like I said, can weaken the metal in the concrete. But what about leakage of various water running down into various cracks? What about the humidity? That the crack just didn't get filled up quite enough and it was still infiltrating the metal rebars and the steel around there that caused it to dilapidate by rusting. If this is proven not to be a terrorist attack, if this is proven that the ground of the sinkholes was not what caused this, I believe that the next best answer to the solution to what has occurred here, and it's something that all engineers and architects need to pay very close attention to, is that any structure close to the ocean, and it don't matter what ocean, what sea, it don't matter what country, once cracks and etc. starts playing a part in exposing the steel in that particular building, it is just a matter of time before the steel will start dilapidating. Once more, it is preserved inside the concrete. A matter of fact, you can take a piece of concrete ordinarily for 50 years and bust it open with rebar in it, and the rebar will be just as if it was brand new whenever the concrete first got poured. But if it's ever cracked to the point that it can be exposed to the elements, that will magnify the cancer in steel that will begin to weaken it. And eventually, we might see problems like we've seen here today in regards towards a whole building collapsing. There's also weight load distributions. One must play into the equation. Just yesterday, or day before yesterday now, there was a walkway that fell going into Washington or around Washington, D.C. somewhere, and I forgot now what road it was, that hurt several people. Wondering if somebody didn't die, and it fell on a bunch of pedestrians, some of them driving, etc., etc. These high-rise buildings that people think that they're invincible, they're not invincible by far. Most concrete only has a lifespan of about 100 years. If that concrete ever starts busting and chipping, allowing for the elements to make contact with the metal, that metal will in fact start deteriorating. It will start rusting. And after a period of years, it will become weakened. I don't know how many people lived in these apartments. I don't know if they had a lot of furniture, if they had no furniture. I don't know if they had pianos in their dining room areas. I don't know if they had a bunch of boxes stored up full of all kinds of containers that added more weight to the building. But this is a horrible, horrible sight that we are seeing here today and tonight, that the people in Miami, Florida need extensive help and prayer for this particular tragedy that has occurred. And not only do these people need prayer, but the way that I understand it, the whole state of Florida is in a crisis right now towards the ocean table rising, that Jesus said to flee into the mountains whenever you shall see these things occurring, because there would be repercussions, that these would be all the beginnings of the sorrows that will fall upon humanity. If we are not smart enough to identify these issues, instead of seeing the loss of life on a little scale, we could possibly see the loss of life on a grand scale like we have never, ever imagined before. And it's not just pertaining to the skyscrapers. It's pertaining to the bridges. It's pertaining to the walkways. It's pertaining to, initially, the states that are closest to the ocean that are being exposed on a day-to-day level pertaining to humidity and salt. Probably as much as 15, 20 miles inland, you're still prone of having this type of environment that once more can cause erosion. That erosion eventually can cause this. It's something that the inspectors and the architects, the engineers, whenever they build these buildings, it's something that they really, really need to pay close attention to, because I have always believed that the rebar needed to be coated with a special coating on the metal itself, because if you take the steel, by and large, any type of steel building, before they start pouring the concrete in it, by and large, most steel is primed or painted or both. And the reason why that it's primed and painted is to help to eliminate massive erosion that could cause the steel beams to actually just fall in the floor. If they got rusty enough, they wouldn't be able to hold their own weight up. That's the purpose for sealing it. They do not seal rebar. I personally have always believed, working in the construction industry, that rebar, it doesn't matter if it's small rebar or big rebar, because in some cases they make rebar almost the size of your wrist. I mean, it's huge, but it's for big jobs. But I've never seen rebar with any type of coating, regardless whether it was primer or paint. And if I did, it was very, very little that I've seen on the construction sites. Very little that I've seen. Most of the time, it's raw rebar, and most of the time, it's already got a skim of light rust already beginning on the content of the metal. Once more, you're talking about metal and concrete. You're talking about an area close to the ocean or the sea that is exposed to lots of salt. If you have to put special grease or some sort of Vaseline or WD-40 on your wrenches and tools to keep them from rusting, if you was living and working in the Keys or anywhere that you're prone to have to be exposed to that kind of atmosphere, I think you can pretty well figure out what it could do and would do and maybe has done to this particular site. It needs to be looked into thoroughly if we plan on being a thriving nation without these types of catastrophes interfering with the successes of our accomplishments. Thanks again. Good luck to all of us, and once more, pray for the victims of those that has went through such horror. God bless and shalom.